There was a time when American ingenuity didn't just mean dreaming big. It meant building it, selling it, owning it. But somewhere between the factory floor and the boardroom, between the prototype and the product, we let the future slip through our fingers. This is the story of the technology we created and the world that took it over, because of what we were building there. Your father might have worked in one of those plants, coming home with stories about the future being assembled one chip at a time. Walk through any American home in the 1950s and 60s, and you'd see the evidence everywhere. The RCA television in the living room, designed and built in Indianapolis. The Zenith radio on the kitchen counter, manufactured in Chicago. The Motorola walkie-talkies your kids played with, assembled right here at home. We weren't just inventing technology. We were building it, selling it, servicing it, living with it. The whole cycle happened here, on American soil, in American factories, by American hands. But something else was happening across the Pacific, something most Americans didn't notice at first. Japanese engineers were watching, learning, studying everything we did. They toured our factories, bought our products, took them apart to see how they worked. Sony started as a small company in a bombed-out department store in Tokyo. Akio Morita, its founder, visited the United States in 1952 and saw the transistor technology we'd invented. He licensed it from Western Electric for $25,000. That investment would change everything. In 1955, Sony released the first transistor radio, small enough to fit in your shirt pocket. Americans had invented the transistor, but we were still making big radios, tabletop models, furniture pieces. The Japanese saw something different. They saw portable. They saw personal. They saw the teenager who wanted music in their pocket, not bolted to the living room floor. By the time American companies realized what was happening, Sony had already won the race we didn't know we were running. Your first transistor radio probably came from Japan. Do you remember it? Maybe it was a birthday gift, small and plastic and miraculous, picking up top 40 stations while you lay in bed at night. The technology inside was American, but the vision of what it could become, that came from somewhere else. It was the first crack in the foundation, the first sign that inventing something and owning its future weren't the same thing. The pattern repeated with television. RCA Laboratories in Princeton, New Jersey spent the 1960s developing something extraordinary. Scientists there figured out how to make images appear on flat screens using liquid crystals instead of bulky cathode ray tubes. The liquid crystal display was born in American labs, refined by American researchers, patented by American companies. RCA built prototypes that seemed like pure science fiction. Imagine a television thin as a picture frame, light as a briefcase, using barely any electricity. It was the future, and we'd invented it. But RCA never quite figured out how to manufacture LCDs cheaply enough for consumers. The technology was brilliant, but expensive, temperamental, difficult to produce at scale. So RCA did what many American companies did in those years. They published their research, they licensed their patents, they shared their discoveries with the world. Sharp Corporation in Japan took that research and ran with it. So did Seiko and Casio. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, while RCA struggled with production, Japanese companies turned LCD technology into watches, calculators, portable televisions, laptop screens, everything. By the time you bought your first LCD monitor in the 1990s, RCA barely existed. The company that invented the technology, that pioneered the research, that held the original patents, had been broken apart and sold off. You were watching the future we invented on a screen made by someone else. It happened so gradually you might not have noticed. One year, American brands dominated. The next year, they were just one option among many. Then they were gone. Walk into any Circuit City or CompUSA in 1985, and you'd see the transformation happening in real time. The VCRs on the shelves, those magical machines that let you record your favorite shows and build a movie library at home, they should have been American. Ampex Corporation in Redwood City, California, invented video recording in 1956. Their machines were the size of refrigerators and cost $50,000, but they worked. Television stations used them to record broadcasts for the first time in history. Ed Sullivan could finally be watched twice. Ampex kept making better and better machines for broadcasters. They focused on perfection, on professional quality, on the high-end market. Meanwhile, Japanese companies looked at video recording and saw your living room. Sony developed Betamax. JVC created VHS. They made the machines smaller, cheaper, simpler. By 1977, when you could finally buy a VCR for your home, the choice was between two Japanese formats. Ampex, the company that started it all, never made a home video recorder. They invented the technology and then watched from the sidelines as others turned it into a revolution. Do you remember the debates, Beta or VHS? Your friends swore by one or the other. Video rental stores carried both formats, then slowly, inevitably, VHS won. But the real story wasn't which Japanese format prevailed. The real story was that there were no American formats at all. We'd invented video recording, then let the entire home video revolution happen without us. The same story played out with cameras. Kodak wasn't just a company in Rochester, New York. It was an institution, a guarantee, a piece of American identity. For 100 years, Kodak meant photography. When you said Kodak moment, everyone knew what you meant. The company employed thousands in Rochester, built communities around their factories, made fortunes for their shareholders. In 1975, a young Kodak engineer named Stephen Sasson did something remarkable. He built the first digital camera. It was ugly, impractical, barely functional. 8 pounds of circuitry and lenses that recorded grainy black and white images onto a cassette tape. Each photo took 23 seconds to save. But it worked. It proved that photography could exist without film, without chemicals, without the darkroom. Sasson showed it to Kodak's executives, excited about the possibilities. They thanked him politely and then buried the project. Digital photography threatened film, and film was everything Kodak knew, everything they were. While Kodak protected yesterday, Sony, Canon, and Nikon built tomorrow. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, they refined digital cameras, made them smaller, cheaper, better. By the time you bought your first digital camera, probably in the late 90s or early 2000s, Kodak was scrambling to catch up. They eventually made digital cameras too, but they'd lost years, momentum, vision. The company that could have owned digital photography filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Rochester, a city that once thrived on Kodak's success, became a symbol of what happens when you invent the future but refuse to build it. Think about the last time your phone died. You probably plugged it into a charger without thinking twice about it. That lithium-ion battery keeping your life connected, powering everything from your laptop to your electric car, it came from American innovation. John Goodenough, working at the University of Texas and MIT in the 1980s, developed the lithium-ion battery technology that would change everything. He was trying to solve the energy crisis, to find better ways to store power cleanly and efficiently. Goodenough was in his 60s when he made his breakthrough, an age when most people are thinking about retirement. He won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2019 at age 97, the oldest Nobel laureate in history. His invention powers the modern world. But if you look at where lithium-ion batteries are actually made, Goodenough's name doesn't appear on the factory doors. Sony commercialized the technology first in Japan. Samsung and LG scaled it up in South Korea. Now China produces more than 3/4 of the world's lithium-ion batteries. The factories aren't in Texas or Massachusetts. They're in Shenzhen, Shanghai, and across Asia. When car companies talk about building electric vehicles, they're not talking about battery factories in Detroit or California. They're talking about securing supply chains that stretch across the Pacific. We invented the battery that would power the 21st century, but we didn't build the future it enabled. Solar power tells the same story, only more so. Bell Labs, that same legendary laboratory in New Jersey that gave us the transistor, created the first practical solar cell in 1954. American scientists figured out how to turn sunlight directly into electricity, efficiently enough to matter. NASA used American-made solar panels to power satellites and space missions. For decades, solar power was an American technology, expensive and specialized, something for research and space exploration. Then China decided to own the industry, not just compete in it, not just participate in it, but dominate it completely. They built factories on a scale American companies never imagined. They subsidized production, controlled raw materials, developed supply chains. While America debated whether solar power was viable, whether it was too expensive, whether we should invest in it, China was building an empire. By 2010, Chinese companies made more than half the world's solar panels. Today, it's closer to 80%. If you put solar panels on your roof recently, trying to lower your electricity bill or help the environment, they almost certainly came from China. The technology that could power a clean energy future, that could reduce dependence on foreign oil, that could address climate change, it was invented here. But the industry built on that invention, the jobs it created, the manufacturing expertise it required, that's all happening somewhere else. You might wonder how this happened. How did we invent so much and build so little? The answer isn't simple, but it's not mysterious either. It happened one decision at a time, one quarterly earnings report at a time, one factory closure at a time. American companies looked at manufacturing and saw costs. Labor was expensive here. Environmental regulations added expenses. Workers expected benefits, safety standards, reasonable hours. It was so much cheaper to design products here and build them there. The consulting firms had a name for it. They called it focusing on core competencies. American companies should focus on high-value activities like design, marketing, and research. Let someone else handle the messy, expensive business of actually making things. It sounded smart in boardrooms. It looked good in business school case studies. Profits went up when you closed expensive American factories and opened cheaper Asian ones. Stock prices rose. Executives got bonuses. Shareholders were happy. But something was lost that you can't measure in quarterly reports. When you stop making things, you eventually lose the knowledge of how to make them. The engineer who understood that specific manufacturing process, they retired or moved to where the factories were. The supplier who made that critical component, they went out of business or relocated overseas. The community of expertise that develops around manufacturing, the technical schools and apprenticeships and accumulated wisdom, it all dissipated like morning fog. Your father might have seen it happen in real time. Maybe he worked at a factory that made televisions or radios or computer components. Year by year, the workforce shrank. Departments closed. Production lines went quiet. Eventually, the whole plant shut down. The company said they were moving manufacturing to Mexico or Taiwan or China, where it was more competitive. The products would be better and cheaper, they promised. And in some ways, they were right. Prices fell. Quality often improved. But the jobs, the expertise, the industrial base, they didn't come back. By the time you were raising your own family in the 1990s and 2000s, Made in America had become rare in electronics. You might have looked for it, wanted to buy American, but the options barely existed. The television was Korean, the camera was Japanese. The computer was assembled in China from parts made in Taiwan and Malaysia and Thailand. Even American brands like Apple and Dell designed their products here but built them there. Some people said it didn't matter. We were moving to a service economy, an information economy. Let other countries make things. Americans would do higher value work. We'd be the architects while others were the construction workers. But that metaphor misses something crucial. Architects who never visit construction sites, who never see how things are actually built, they eventually lose touch with what's possible. Innovation and manufacturing aren't separate things. They feed each other, inform each other, make each other better. The countries that took our manufacturing learned this lesson well. They didn't just build our designs, they improved on them, refined them, eventually designed their own. South Korea went from making cheap electronics to leading the world in displays and memory chips. Taiwan became indispensable for advanced semiconductors. China moved from basic assembly to sophisticated manufacturing to innovative design. They climbed the value chain we thought we'd always own. Now we face strange dependencies. When a drought hits Taiwan, we worry about computer chip supplies. When tensions rise with China, we realize how much of our technology comes from there. The pandemic revealed supply chains we didn't know existed, showed us how fragile our access to basic electronics had become. Things we thought we could always buy became scarce because factories on the other side of the world shut down. Some things are changing. There's talk of reshoring, of bringing manufacturing back, of building semiconductor fabs in Arizona and Ohio. The government offers incentives. Companies make announcements. But rebuilding an industrial base takes decades, not years. It requires not just factories, but the entire ecosystem around them. The workers with the right skills, the suppliers who make the components, the schools that train the next generation, the communities that support it all. That doesn't come back just because we want it to. Your children and grandchildren live in a world built on American inventions. The smartphone connecting them to friends was born from technologies we pioneered. The electric car in the driveway runs on batteries we invented. The solar panels on rooftops capture sunlight. Using principles we discovered. The flat screens on every wall display images using technology we developed. The foundations are ours. The buildings belong to someone else. Maybe that's just how global economics works. Maybe it was inevitable. Maybe trying to keep manufacturing here was always fighting against the tide of history and competitive advantage and rational markets. But walking through an electronics store today or scrolling through products online, you can't help but feel like something was lost that we didn't mean to give away. Not just jobs or factories or market share, but something harder to define. A sense that we made the world we lived in. That the future wasn't just something we imagined, but something we built with our own hands. The great irony is that American innovation never stopped. Our universities still lead the world. Our research labs still make breakthroughs. Our engineers still invent what's next. The ideas keep coming. But there's a gap now between inventing and owning, between discovery and delivery, between the laboratory and the living room. We're brilliant at the first part. We've surrendered much of the second. We built the ladder to the future, then we let others climb it. The question isn't whether we can invent what comes next. The question is whether we'll build it too. What technology do you remember that used to be made in America? Share your memories in the comments below.